All right, welcome back to the Powers on Sports podcast. I'm Jason. You just heard Mike Neighbors give us a good breakdown on Sean Payton and the NFL playoffs and all that kind of good stuff. And now we are going to transition to, and big news this week, the Hall of Fame voters made their choices for the 2022 class, and only one member was elected, one David Ortiz, and nobody better to talk to baseball. We're going to talk lockout. We're going to talk Rays. We're going to talk Hall of Fame with Steve Carney. Steve is the founder of St. Pete Nine. Steve also does a couple podcasts. He's also now working for Major League Baseball, doing some work for them. So, Steve, welcome back to the podcast, sir.
Well, Jason, if I had known that Mike Neighbors was going to be preceding me, I would have showed up earlier for that. Mike has been an old friend of mine. We go back probably close to 15 years. So it's always great when you've got good people like that on your podcast. You know you're doing well. So
yeah, I told Mike the first time I had him on, I was like, I remember back when I lived in Birmingham, Mike was working in Tuscaloosa at the time, doing some TV stuff, and I remember seeing Mike on TV doing stuff in Tuscaloosa, not knowing who Mike was at the time, but small world how you've been around long enough, you see some people you recognize.
Absolutely, and Mike is one of the best. His work with the Saints is awesome. He's done some really good stuff and some really interesting. He's done some really cool little niche things like the Aaron's stuff on YouTube, which is just so good.
And he just wrote the book with Drew Brees. He just wrote the Brees way that just came out.
I'm sure he's going to be pitching that to no end, as well he should.
Yeah, that's absolutely. All right, before we get to the Hall of Fame stuff, give the audience a little update on the lockouts. There's still, the lockout started about a month or so back. There's been talk of they probably won't get serious in negotiations till we get close to spring training. Spring training typically starts first week of February or so, something like that.
Yeah, usually it's around Valentine's Day that things get going. And as expected, Jason, we thought that they wouldn't do anything through the Christmas holiday and into the new year, and that's exactly what happened. They met as we're speaking here on this Wednesday. They met last week, and but it was over a Zoom call. But they did actually have some sort of negotiations, and the league put out their first sort of proposal and some of the things that went into it that they were looking to try. And they were looking at, okay, maybe we'll bump the minimum salary up a little bit. We'll do this, we'll do that. Really nothing of real teeth into it. It was a first kind of just throw out there a low ball off.
Tell the audience, give me from both sides, from the owner, the management side, and the player side. What are the two or three issues that are most important to the owners, and the two or three issues most important to the players that we're really fighting about?
Well, I mean, issue number 1, 2, 3, all the way down to about $1.6 million is money and the amount of revenue that the players are receiving, that the owners are reeling in from fans like you and I. I mean, you look at it, in 2019, Major League Baseball was a $10 billion industry. So, unfortunately for the players, because of how things have gone, the average, or the median salary in Major League Baseball has fallen while revenues have gone through the roof. And the players don't like that. They feel like they're not getting their fair share of the revenue from the owners. They want more of that money. And the other thing that they want is they want younger players to be getting paid more, because you look at it, there's, the minimum salary in Major League Baseball this past year, I think, was $570,000. And there are 63% of players in Major League Baseball making under $1 million.
Right.
Think about that. I mean, that doesn't happen in the other leagues, and especially not in leagues like the NBA and the NFL, where the television revenue is handled centrally and distributed in split. Whereas in Major League Baseball, the television revenues, the local television deals make up a majority of the revenue for teams, and they're all different. The revenues that the Yankees and the Red Sox make is a lot higher than the revenues that the Rays, the Pittsburgh Pirates, and the Oakland A's will make. And so the players feel that it's an unfair advantage. It's an unfair playing field, and they want more of that money. Plus, the owners have learned that they don't have to give out big money contracts to guys on the other side of 30.
Right.
Well, when you're coming up at 23, you've got 6 years until you make it, or 6 seasons, I should say, until you make it to free agency. And the owners have become adept at learning how to manipulate that to keep guys as long as possible. And now all of a sudden, you're becoming a free agent for the first time at 30 years old. And the owners have said, we're not going to pay anybody that's over 30, that's 30 years old or over. The hell is going on? So the big money contracts like the Albert Pujols contract, those contracts are long gone. And so now the only guys that are making any money are the guys like a Bryce Harper, where they've come up so young that they're now 26 or 27 getting to free agency for the first time. Those are the guys that are going to make all the money.
And you see a lot of these teams, they're going a little bit ahead of the game. They're willing to give a longer term contract to a guy like Acuna, like a
Wander Franco.
Yes, that they're willing to pay him a little more on the front side, knowing that what they're paying him in years 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 is going to be way below market value then.
Exactly. And I think that the players, they're not willing to call it collusion just yet.
Right.
But you remember back in the late 80s and the early 90s, the owners were found to have colluded to try and keep contract prices low, and they ended up having to pay through the nose because that's illegal. And so I really do think that they haven't gotten to the point of calling it collusion, but this is about as close to collusion in the Players Association mind as anything. The owners are worried that salaries are going to get out of control.
Right.
They're worried that you're going to have a reserve second baseman making, 17 or 18 million dollars a season. Like in the NBA, you look at it, there are guys that are on benches of NBA teams making $20 million a year, which is just a ridiculous number. And they're very concerned that something like that could be coming to Major League Baseball, and they want to try and get a hold of just how much, they're going to be able to have to pay guys in the open market. And so that's the big crux of what's going on between these two sides.
And I know the players are trying to reduce the number of years to free agency to like 4, from 6 to like 4.
They want to go from 6 to 5.
Okay.
But I think it's going to be very difficult for that to happen, because I think the owners see that as the big that would be a big precursor to salaries going way up. So the compromise is going to end up being that players from year 0 to year 3, before you reach arbitration, they're going to make a little more, and you might see the renewal rates getting a little larger. But I don't think that you're going to see free agency get shortened any further. I think that what you may end up seeing is that you end up getting more money for those year 0 to year 3 players, but you will only see guys getting 3 years of arbitration, as opposed to the Super 2 concept, which is in place right now, where the top 20, I think it's 22%, but it's the top fifth of year 2 to year 3 players are eligible for arbitration, whereas the rest of them have to go through 1 more year of renewal before you get to arbitration. I think that Super 2 concept is going to go away. But I think that year 0 to year 3 may get more money, but it's not going to shorten free agency on the backside.
All right, so we've just given you all the nuts and bolts of all this stuff. What do you think is going to happen? You think we'll have an agreement by spring training? Do you think it'll drag into spring training a little bit? What do you see happening?
I mean, I have said all along the date that I have in the pool, if so to speak, is February 4th. I think that's the Friday. It's 10 days or so before pitchers and catchers are scheduled to report, because I look at it this way. There are still a lot of guys out there that can't sign. They're in the free agent market. Guys like Carlos Correa are still out there, and they're going to end up there's going to be when the lockout or when the agreement is in place, and they say, okay, teams, you can start talking to players again. There's going to be just absolute chaos for the
Fury.
first 24 to 48 hours.
Sure.
I just have a feeling that, I definitely do not envy being a major league general manager at that point, because you're going to have the phone surgically attached to your ear,
right,
to try and get a hold of some of these guys, or at least some of them. Like Brian Cashman is going to be one. I don't think Eric Neander is going to have the phone surgically attached, but I think Brian Cashman, Andrew Friedman, and Brandon Gomes in Los Angeles, guys,
the Cubs, the
Cubs,
Red Sox,
the Rangers, Washington,
big market teams with
Mets.
big payrolls, big market, big payrolls.
Yes, the big payroll guys are going to end up having a fury for the 10 days probably or so, if that happens on February 4th. Now, the thought process is that you don't have to report on February the 14th. My guess is they can go probably all the way until the last week of February before coming to an agreement, and still get all of spring training in time. Because you think about it, the first 10 days or so of spring training is pitchers and catchers throwing bullpens and doing PFP.
Right.
There ain't nothing going on.
Right.
You could scrap that entire 10 days and still be okay. You wait until everybody comes in. You just have nothing but full squad practices for say 4 or 5 days, getting guys bullpen sessions, getting guys
conditioned and all that stuff,
live PP,
yep.
getting together for maybe 4 or 5 days of practices, because all these guys are in shape. This is not the 60s or earlier where guys were having to take second jobs in order to live. These guys are, they're in shape. Pitchers have been throwing since Thanksgiving for most of them, and I would think that at least every pitcher has been throwing bullpens since the beginning of December. So I think that they're all pretty much in shape. It's just getting on, the team's mound, working with your team's catchers, and I think they're going to be okay at that point. And that way you still get all of your Grapefruit and Cactus League games in, you get everybody built up safely, and you're still ready to go at the end of March for the regular season.
I'm with you. All right, let's transition to the Hall of Fame announcement yesterday. Only one, David Ortiz, gets in the Hall of Fame. The big news here, last year on the ballot for Bonds and Clemens, they don't make it. Bonds gets 66%, Clemens about 65%. Just your thoughts on Ortiz getting in on the first ballot. I'll give you the background for those of you that don't know. Back in 2003, Ortiz was on the quote unquote list of guys that failed a test, came out by the New York Times. It was never publicized. It was never confirmed, but everybody, the word got out that he was on the list. He gets in year one of eligibility, steroids. Again, remember David Ortiz before 2003 in Boston was not a good player with Minnesota, had been released. Red Sox pick him up. He had all the great run he had with the Red Sox, playoff success. Bonds, Clemens. Again, Clemens never failed a test. Bonds never failed a test, but we all have our notions about what they did or didn't do. Just your general thought of the steroid guy Ortiz gets in, and then Bonds and Clemens don't get in.
Here's my thought about that, Jason. I mean, for me, I know that there are a lot of members of the Baseball Writers Association of America, who are the group that does the Hall of Fame voting. I'm not a member of the Baseball Writers Association. I never have been. So I've never had the opportunity to have a Hall of Fame vote. But I have a feeling, and my thought is that there are way too many guys in the Baseball Writers Association that are trying to be the morality police. I look at it as there was a stretch of time in baseball's history from 1996 to say 2006. Look, that
20 years
period.
20 years.
10 years.
Sorry, 10 years.
That 10-year period, yes, where before the testing became full time.
Yep.
I look at that stretch of time. It was everywhere. Performance enhancing drugs. You can even go all the way back into the late 80s.
Sure.
Where Jose Canseco looked like a football player out there, playing, and we all learned that Jose Canseco was taking performance enhancing drugs. He's admitted to it. So even that 20-year period from 1986 to 2006, there was something going on in Major League Baseball. And I think you have to acknowledge that it happened. But I think you can still say it was still kind of a level playing field because so many guys were using it. So I don't understand why people have such a averse, reason to letting some of these guys in that didn't test positive once the testing came into effect. Guys like Rafael Palmeiro and Manny Ramirez, who failed the tests after they started testing.
Right.
And Alex Rodriguez is in that same boat for me. They all tested positive. They had issues once the testing came into being.
Right.
So Palmeiro, I have no problem with Palmeiro not getting it. I have no problem with Manny Ramirez not getting in. I have no problem with Alex Rodriguez not getting in, because he admitted that he did it after the testing had started and got suspended for an entire year because of it.
Right.
So I'm okay with that. But Bonds and Clemens are two guys that, they never tested positive when they were there when the testing was implemented. They never tested positive. Yes, Barry Bonds, you can go by the size of his head and his association with Victor Conti and Balco. You can go with the court cases against Clemens and the fact that Clemens looked completely different in his last few years with the Yankees than he did as a young man with the Boston Red Sox and even with his time in Toronto. But I think that they should have both gotten in. In fact, on stpete9.com, I did I put up what I would have had for my ballot. And I had Bonds, Clemens, Ortiz, and then I also had Jeff Kent, who I think is the best offensive second baseman of all time. And I'm not sure why he does not get more love. But it would have been interesting this year if both Bonds and Kent had gotten in, because those two guys hate each other.
Can't stand each other.
and to have them have to be connected at the Hall of Fame for all time. Could you imagine what that ceremony would have been? So
the dinner, the luncheons and the dinners and all that stuff.
Would have been must-watch television just to watch the two sneer at each other. But I had those two. So I had Kent. I also had Gary Sheffield, who I think may end up being the best player that the writers have left out, that, not because of PEDs. I don't know why Gary Sheffield, isn't in either. And Billy Wagner, because I think that closers are highly underrepresented in the Hall of Fame. And Billy Wagner's stuff was just filthy, and guys went up there guessing when he was on the mound. And so I had those six. Yeah,
2 points. So one, a lot of people think that Clemens and Bonds, part of the reason they didn't get in was their likability, where Ortiz is the charismatic guy, personality, big personality. Do you think that has any place in anybody's voting? Should that have any place? Because obviously we all know Bonds was a jerk to the media and despised it. And Clemens probably wasn't much better, to be honest with you.
Clemens could be grumpy as well. I mean, Bonds, I think Barry Bonds, the history of Barry Bonds to the media is not a secret. Bonds didn't like the media didn't like Bonds, which is amazing. I met Barry Bonds once. It was when he was the hitting coach for the Marlins, and I found him to be, he was fine to me. Now maybe it's because I'm friends with one of his friends, Orestes Estrada, who is one of the broadcasters for the Rays, who was one of Bonds' teammates in Pittsburgh. So, I dropped the Orestes name, and he was fine with me. And I think that also you saw Jose Fernandez, the legend, the Marlins pitcher who passed away a few years ago. He and Bonds were thick as thieves. And I was joking. I'm like, that's how good Jose Fernandez is he made Barry Bonds look like a human being, which you never saw. But I think that there are writers that have making the I just don't like him, so I'm not voting for him. It shouldn't be that. but I have no doubt that that's somewhat part of it, especially with those two guys. Now there are other guys that I kind of shake my head and go, I don't know. There's something else there as to why like Sammy Sosa's name comes up a lot.
Yeah,
because Sammy's got over 600 home runs, and he had a stretch where he had hit more home runs than even Bonds. But he never got more than say 17 or 18% of the vote, and I never understood why, because this was his last year on the ballot as well. People talk about Bonds and Clemens, but this was also Sammy Sosa's 10th year, and I don't know why Sammy. Well, there has to, and I said this in my article on stpete9.com. There has to be something else out there as to why people are not putting Sammy Sosa on the ballot. I don't know what it is.
Well, yeah, he had the cork bat incident one time, and
and that was against the Devil Rays.
Yeah, right.
That happened, but there, I mean,
and
guys,
a lot of people thought he was on performance enhancing drugs too.
Exactly, but why is he at 18%,
right,
and Bonds at 66%?
Right, that's you're right. All right, yeah. Well, one last point on Bonds and Clemens too that people don't realize: both those guys had Hall of Fame careers before the speculation about their using. So that's the other part of the dilemma that's hard to fathom. That you're going to put Ortiz in, knowing he failed the test, but yet you're not going to put Bonds and Clemens, who were probably Hall of Famers before they were even accused of anything or speculation, that they don't get enough to get in.
Ortiz might also be the last real DH to get in, because of the way things are going now. You don't have guys that are just DHs now. Nelson Cruz might get in.
Right.
He's probably close, but Nelson Cruz was an outfielder for a large chunk of his career before he started to slow down. David Ortiz was, a 25-year-old DH. So,
yes.
He was a guy that just could not play a position. And so I think that, that's why he might end up being the last real full-time DH that gets into the Hall of Fame as well.
All right, you listen to the Powers on Sports podcast. I'm on with Steve Carney. Steve works for MLB. He's got his own St. Pete 9 platform, which he talks all things Rays and MLB all throughout the year. So definitely check Steve out on the different platforms. Two more things, and I'll get you out of here. Let's talk about the Rays and their split season plan of Montreal and Tampa splitting it up and all that stuff. MLB came out last week, says, no sirree, Stu Sternberg. Your thoughts?
Well, I know that that those that are listening can't see me right now, but I'm like, oh.
Well, you can watch us on the Powers on Sports podcast on the YouTube channel.
Oh, there you go.
Steve.
So
you can watch Steve.
Going, yes, yes. I mean, for me, it's personal. Why I think that I wanted to see the Rays stay here full time because I live here.
It's a lousy idea.
I didn't think it worked. I thought it was going to be very difficult for that to get pulled off because you and I are old enough to remember the Kansas City Omaha Kings.
Yeah.
And for those that may not be old enough, the Sacramento Kings in the NBA, they weren't always in Sacramento. They actually started in Rochester, New York as the Royals. They went from Rochester to Cincinnati and they were the Cincinnati Royals. And then they moved to Kansas City and became the Kansas City Kings. And for a couple of years, they split time between Kansas City and Omaha, Nebraska. And they became the Kansas City Omaha Kings. And
Reggie Theus back in the day.
Yeah, way back in the day, Reggie Theus. But it didn't work out. Splitting the season between two different homes to try and it means you're not building a fan base in either of them.
Right.
If you have two, it's like I look at it. It's kind of like quarterbacks. You got two quarterbacks, it means you have no quarterback. It's like if you try and have two homes, it means you don't have one.
Right.
You have one home.
Right.
And I thought that was going to be a big problem. I thought that the Players Association was never going to get on board at this because it just was going to cause chaos for guys saying,
just
"Oh
personally,
my God,
2 homes. You got to have 2 homes, 2 lives,
2 homes." All the tax implications because now you're like, and it's not like you're going from Florida to Georgia,
Right.
you're going Florida to, someplace
Not
else in the
Tampa.
United States.
It's not Tampa to Orlando. It's not Tampa to Orlando.
But now it's not even Tampa to New York City. It's Canada. So you're paying federal income taxes in two different places,
right?
Because of this. And so it just was going to be an absolute logistical nightmare for the players. And so I didn't think the players were going to go for it at all. And so you had to understand that this was going to get shot down at some point. And now the Rays are in a situation. We've got 6 seasons left with the use agreement at Tropicana Field. The Rays are contractually obligated to play their home games at Tropicana Field through the 2027 season. But we're at a point now where you got to get the wedding done here, if you know what I mean.
So what's the deal on stadium? What do you think is going to happen?
I think there is going to be a stadium. I think it is going to be in Tampa. And I think you're going to start seeing things get real serious here
real fast,
very, very soon, because you think about it, you've got to have everything in place probably by November of next year.'ve got to have taxpayers voting on this in November of 2023. And then you figure out, okay, now we know kind of know where it's going to be. Now we know how it's going to get paid for. Now we can put shovels in the ground.
Takes 2 years to build. Takes 2 years to build it.
It takes at least 2 years to build, depending on the site and what you've got to demolish to get started.
Right.
I don't know if they're going to build in the same place where they were talking about beforehand. There are a couple of other places that also kind of make sense around the same area. There's a mill, there's a flour mill called Ardent Mills, which is like 3 blocks from Amalie Arena in downtown Tampa, and it's kind of the same size of a parcel as the Ybor City site,
right?
But it's going to be completely cleared out. The problem is it's owned by the wrong owner. Because they sold it, but they sold it to Jeffrey Vinnick, the owner of the Tampa Bay Lightning, for the Water Street project here in Tampa. But it's if you look at it, it's perfect for a baseball stadium. It's got the right layout and everything. The parking is going to be a nightmare, but it was going to be a nightmare in the Ybor City project as well.
Right.
But it's close to it's literally one road, and you're on the Crosstown Expressway.
Right.
I mean, it's really close to the highways. And I do think that they could put it there if they need to, but you got to get the land from the other owner. And I don't know if that's going to be possible, but I think that could end up being an alternate spot to the Ybor site if they can't get the land from Ybor City.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you got to, if you don't have something done, like you said, by the end of next year, end of 23, big problem.
Now you're looking at going
Montreal.
Somewhere else.
Yeah.
I don't think you're not going to go to Montreal. And I'll tell you why I think the owners don't want to put a existing team in Montreal. They want to put an expansion team in Montreal. I said this to someone around Major League Baseball last year. When this whole thing came out, and the talk was that Stu Sternberg was working with Stephen Bronfman. I said to them, why would Major League Baseball want $1 billion of Stephen Bronfman's money when they can get $3 billion of Stephen Bronfman's money? Because that's what the expansion fee is going to be. I was looking at it.
Good point.
If you and you're going to bring Stephen Bronfman in, that means one owner is going to get paid. If you have Stephen Bronfman bring in an expansion team, 30 owners get paid. So, and you look at it, you're going to make every owner, because you're not going to just provide one expansion team, you're going to provide 2. And if they're $3 billion each, now you're looking at $200 million per owner. That's what they'll get, windfall. So, I mean, why would you not?
Including Stu Sternberg.
Including Stu Sternberg. Absolutely. So that's why I don't think that Montreal is going to get an existing team. They're going to get an expansion team. And I think that, the thought process is, the A's have been doing this out on the West Coast to try and get the Howard Terminal project, which is where their new stadium wants to be. The city wants their new stadium built going, and then you have the 32nd team is in Las Vegas.
Where do you think? Where do you think? What are the one or two cities? You said Las Vegas, and give me the other city. There's been Nashville talk, Charlotte,
Nashville,
Portland,
Charlotte. I think that if the Rays leave Tampa and they decide to relocate, it's going to be somewhere on the East Coast. I don't think they want to really shake up the divisions too much, though.
Buffalo, maybe Buffalo in the Northeast.
No, I don't think Buffalo, only because of the weather.
Yeah.
And there's no real I mean, Salem Field, you played back in the day. Salem Field is not a good location for a major league ballpark. It's not big enough.
Yeah.
Nashville, where the Sounds play is downtown. It's by the river, and it's got room to expand. So I think Nashville is very, very likely. Charlotte, there's room. So I think that, kicking the Knights out is going to be kind of a pain in the rear end because they're so beloved in that area. And I think that, teams like Durham will be kind of angry that a major league team is coming into their neck of the woods.
They'll get over it. They'll get over it.
They would get over it. They would probably end up, especially if the Rays moved to Charlotte, that was probably that's a big reason why the Rays would move to Charlotte. But Charlotte and Nashville are the two
East
places.
East Coast.
Yes, for the Rays, I think, and really because in both of those places, once you expand to 32 and you realign, because that's what's going to happen. When they expand to 32, you're going to go from 3 divisions of 5 each to 4 divisions of 4 each.
Right.
It's going to look very similar to the NFL. It's going to be regionally based, and so I think that once that happens, once they figure out what they're going to do with Oakland and what they're going to do with the Rays, you're going to see the expansion talk ramp up very, very quickly.
All right, I know you're a big sports fan. Give me your thoughts on last weekend NFL, one of the most, probably the wildest divisional weekend in the history of the league. Woo! To me, I think you had a top 5 all-time playoff game with Buffalo, Kansas City Sunday night. Just your thoughts on the weekend in general, and obviously you're a Tampa guy with the Bucks, and just drama with Brady and Rodgers getting eliminated, and what a game in Kansas City Sunday night.
Oh my God. If you're the NFL, last weekend could not have gone any better with how bad Super Wild Card weekend was. And I put that in quotes. I thought Super Wild Card weekend stunk, but the divisional weekend was unreal. It was if you're the National Football League, if you're Roger Goodell, you've got a grin the size of Manhattan right now, because everything went absolutely perfectly. 4 games, 3 of them came down to walk-off field goals, and the last one came down to a touchdown where they scored 13 points in the last 13 seconds. I was like, you could not have worked out any better. And yes, Buffalo, Kansas City was an all-timer. That was Oilers Bills. That was Music City Miracle.
Absolutely.
That was Minneapolis Miracle worthy. I mean, that was just an incredible finish. And think about it's going to overshadow a Bucks Rams game that saw the 44-year-old likely MVP of the league coming back from down 27-3 in the third quarter to tie the game up. And they should have gone to overtime as well. That Sunday was just my heart still hasn't stopped coming down. I'm still my pulse rate is still high, and we're 4 days out, 4 days removed. And
the great thing it wasn't all mistakes. It was playmakers. Like that Kansas City Buffalo game, both teams just kept making plays. It wasn't like there was blunders. Now the Bucks Rams game, there were some turnovers, but that was part of the allure.
Yeah, I mean, the Rams turned the ball over 4 times and still won the game.
Right.
The
Bengals get sacked 9 times and they win in Nashville. I mean, just crazy.
Just an absolutely unreal real weekend of football. And it's something that I know the NFL is going to try and duplicate every single year.
Never
and
again.
They're not going to
No.
be able to do it. It was just that good.
49ers win a game with not an offensive touchdown in 0-degree weather in Green Bay.
Yeah. The only thing that I will say is that, I had hoped that the Bucs and the Packers had won because
sure.
Everybody had said last year, oh, well, the Bucs won. And because people are like, oh, it's going to be so hard to win at Green Bay. I'm like, Bucs went in there and won the NFC Championship game last year. And they were going, well, there were no fans.
Right.
I'm like that matters. That matters to the guys on the field. They don't give a crap. So it's all the same. But obviously the fans thing didn't work for Green Bay because they went out a week earlier. Now,
who do you like this week? Kansas City, Cincinnati, and then San Fran, Los Angeles.
I mean, the Chiefs have played their best football when they needed to, and I've been saying that for weeks. That this is they are right when they need to be right, and so I don't think that you could. I don't see how Cincinnati, even though they've been so good, can stop the Chiefs. I just don't. On the NFC side is going to be real interesting because the Rams are really, really good, but they lost both their games to the 49ers this year. I do have the Rams going.
I do too.
It's kind of like the Bucs last year with the Saints. They went 0-2 against the Saints in the regular season and then won at the playoffs. So I think that's probably what's going to happen again this year. And the talk of the town is going to be, has Matthew Stafford taken the final step to becoming an elite quarterback?
Brady and Rodgers, what do you think is going to happen to them?
Oh man. I hope Brady is back. I said last night on Twitter, I said, I'm not advocating for Brady to retire, but I know that if he does in the next week and a half, that the Pro Football Writers Association should waive the 5-year waiting period and elect Brady this year because looking at the Pro Football Hall of Fame finalists, there are 15 of them, and none of them are sexy. Like there's when the sexiest of your finalists are Jared Allen and Rondé Barber, there ain't no sexy in this class. It's going to be gritty, grimy guys in the and so I think that if Brady says, I'll hang it up if you waive the 5-year waiting period and let me in now. And, there are precedents around sports for that to happen. It's happened a lot in hockey, of all places. But like when Wayne Gretzky retired, they waived the 5-year waiting period and put him in immediately. Same thing with Gordie Howe, waived the 5-year waiting period and put him in. I think that if the Pro Football Writers Association had any stones whatsoever, and yes, I'm calling you out, Pro Football Writers Association. If Brady announces his retirement before your meeting on the Friday before the Super Bowl, you better waive the 5-year waiting requirement and let him in.
That's a no doubter. I agree with
the
that.
other guys can wait.
All right, Steve. Great work, man. Keep up the great work. Tell everybody where they can find you online.
All right. I am at Steve Carney on Twitter and Instagram. As Jason mentioned, stpete9.com. That's STPete9. You can use the number. You can spell it out. Doesn't matter. That's for all things Rays. I've got the Under the Orange Roof podcast, which is right now going through a special series called Baseball Held Hostage, where we talk about the things going on with the lockout. And of course, everything there for the Rays again at stpete9.com.
Awesome, man. Well, good luck with your new gig with MLB. Hopefully you're covering stuff here starting in late February or 1st of March. Hopefully we don't drag this out. Hopefully the owners and players aren't stupid enough to miss regular season games and such, but you never know with baseball owners and baseball players.
Yeah, you never know. From your lips to God's ears, my friend.
I got you. Well, thanks for the time, Steve. Great work. Keep it up. And that is the conclusion of the Powers on Sports Podcast Championship Week edition. Hope everybody has a great week, and we will see you next time on the Powers on Sports Podcast.